Okay, so I'm back. Well, I got to fix some things from the previous video. Things that I said that I either didn't fully explain, or in this case, something I actually relearned. So it's been a while since I've done a YouTube video. Before this past Thursday night, October 21st, 2021. And so I had forgotten that when you shoot a video on your phone, uh, sometimes the phone is programmed to splice the video at a certain length. So I shot about a 95-minute video on Thursday night, and almost 15 minutes before I signed off, I saw a message flash across my screen, and it went away before I could read it. Well, turns out that message was letting me know that they were splicing the video, and when I got done, I saw that I had 3 segments that were 26 minutes and 51 seconds, and for some reason it adds a second when you upload it to YouTube. And then I had another segment that was 13 minutes and some seconds long. So my 95-minute video had been spliced into 4 segments, with the last segment being about half as long as the first 3. But so I had to relearn that little bit about how the phone works and how the phone records video. So I had thought that that entire 95-minute segment was going to be part 1, but because it got spliced, it turned into parts 1 through 4. So this is not part 2 that I'm starting. This is actually part 5. And so there's that. Hopefully I'll finish this video in less than 54 minutes, and might only have 2 more segments in addition to Thursday night's 4 segments. And I'm going to try to get the meat of what I have to say in this segment, which is almost 3 minutes in, so I've got almost 24 minutes left. But there's that. Okay, so there was a story that I told, an anecdote that I told from late 95 or early 96 when I was living in Jacksonville, Florida. And I said how that there was a mixed group of men and women discussing the Bible. And I support gender equality. There we go. I support gender equality. I don't tell women that they should obey men, even though I'm a Bible believer and the Bible does actually have a lot of gender role scriptures in it. The New Testament is a third as long as the Old Testament, but probably has 3 times as many verses about gender roles, male dominance, what have you. So in the Old Testament, God actually didn't say an awful lot about men needing to control women or that sort of thing. There's a little bit there, but anyway. So I was having this conversation in this mixed group of men and women, and like I say, I don't tell women that they should obey men. I have a whole different tack, but so there were guys who said to me, hey, look, Eric, you know, there are these scriptures about gender roles, women not preaching, wives obeying husbands, yada, yada, yada. And I am the type of guy who will admit when I know that this or that unattractive scripture exists. Okay, I'm not going to deny it. You know, I'm not going to kill the messenger. I wish that when I'm the messenger, people wouldn't try to kill me. But anyway, there were a couple of women, both of whom had the same first and last name, Sheila Williams, and they decided to step up to me and got in my face like they wanted to fight. And so it ended without us going to blows. And I told that much of the story uh, in the first 95-minute segment that I did. And so I'm not sure which of the four parts it falls in, but then I talked about having lost the thought. I didn't know why I brought that up. But when I went back and saw the video again, I was reminded of why I brought that up. I had been talking about how that when women express uh, their thoughts, their emotions, and sometimes it's during a disagreement with a man, and there may be other men who hear it, and sometimes a guy will say what he thinks a woman wants to hear. Uh, he wants to satisfy her, maybe uh, have a date with her in the future. And other times, guys will just say, "Oh, you can't argue with the woman; you can never win." And so, and there are just these different reactions that men have, and sometimes, the man doesn't fully agree with what the woman has to say, but he gives some sort of watered down response, or he says what he thinks she wants to hear just to keep her calm. So, in this instance, um, after we averted the tragedy of me having to fight two women, neither of whom was small, um, they leave, and it's just me and the guys. Uh, there might have been another woman, a woman who I was actually quite fond of. I never asked her out or anything. Her name was Wendy Wyndham, and she was a real cool-headed woman, and I actually found it quite easy to talk to her. But she was part of that function where all of us had met, and she was sometimes in these conversations. These types of conversations took place on a pretty regular basis. Conversations about scripture, and which have, on at least a couple of occasions, led into discussion of gender roles. But I think Wendy might have actually been there on this occasion, but she didn't get feisty, and that just wasn't her style. And so, let me see. But, oh, so when these two women leave, I turn to the guys and I'm like, hey, look, all I did was tell her what the Bible said, and they didn't have to do anything I said, yada, yada, yada. I don't know why they got so upset. And the guys just looked at me and said, we know, we saw it, and then one of the guys went on to say to me, you can't argue with a woman because you can never win, and they didn't actually weigh in so as to say whether or not they thought it made sense for these two Sheila Williamses to be upset. And so they didn't really give any kind of opinion in terms of the content of the discussion before things got a little out of hand. And while I'm on that topic, I should also point out that there was a somewhat different situation with a different outcome in Orlando, Florida. I spent about 20 years living down south, mostly in Florida, and I've lived in different parts of Florida. from the northeast corner in Jacksonville to the very bottom, uh, Miami. So, while I was living in Orlando, I'm just having this conversation with a mixed group of men and women, and I don't think I actually knew any of them, and this wasn't part of a regular function where we met on a regular basis, like the situation in Jacksonville. But we're just having a discussion. I don't even know what it was about. But I do tend to speak in a very calm, even tone. It's extremely rare for me to get upset. Uh, and anyway, I'm speaking in my usual manner. And whatever we were talking about, I expressed an opinion that a certain woman didn't like. And she got an attitude with me, came out of her mouth wrong. And I don't even recall exactly what she said. But whatever it was, the other guys knew that she was wrong. And so, not for her opinion, not for what she had to say, but for the way she came off. And I didn't get angry at this woman. I didn't shout at her. I didn't curse her out. As a matter of fact, I didn't have to say anything. As soon as she came out of her mouth wrong at me, uh, the other guys spoke up in unison and basically told her, look, all that man did was tell you right. No matter what he does to you, he won't be wrong. And and so they basically let her know. If you come out your mouth at him wrong again and he decides to smack you, we are not going to jump in to save you. He wouldn't be wrong. Okay, that they let him know. Let her know rather. And I did not raise my hand like I wanted to hit her, nor did I hit her, but she knew that she had better keep her wits about her. And for the remainder of that conversation, she spoke right. She didn't get out of hand, okay? Because she knew that these guys were not going to defend her if I had decided to smack her, okay? And that says a lot, because a lot of times an emotional person will only get in their emotions if they feel like they can get away with it. And if they know that the other men around are not going to jump in to save somebody who they knew was in the wrong, then they tend to immediately figure out how to act right. That's an interesting dynamic. But it doesn't look like I'm going to cover as much as I want to cover in this first 26 minutes and 51 seconds. I am being a little redundant, I know. But let me see. So, also in the first 95 minutes, I mentioned Roe v. Wade having been passed in 1973, and I mentioned how that I was born in 1969, and by 1977, when I was 8, or maybe 78 when I was 9, but somewhere in there, I became keenly aware of a number of different things happening in the world around me, even though my memories go back to probably about 3 or 4 years old. Just understanding things about people's behaviors and beliefs and so forth goes back to around the time that I was 8 and 9 years old. And so I remember the late 70s where women had begun to really tell men, you gotta be sensitive, you gotta be emotional, or you gotta express your sensitivities, emotions, feelings, make yourself vulnerable, things like that. And so what I didn't say when I mentioned these two matters was that I don't really know that one is connected to the other. I know that the 70s is called the me decade. I learned that in the 80s when I was still in school. But while I don't know that there's a direct connection between Roe v. Wade and women telling men, be sensitive, be emotional, think in such and such a way that women think, it stands to reason that these things happened in rapid succession because there was a movement to empower women, which actually began before the 70s. As a matter of fact, um, I know Eleanor Roosevelt, who was instrumental in creating the United Nations. Um, well, she came out in 1948 or thereabouts. Uh, After her husband had already died, she didn't try to break away from him while he was alive and do her own thing. Uh, sure, you could say that it's because he was dying and she was there to care for him. I'm sure that's part of it. But I don't think that she, even before he got polio, I don't think that she was out there telling women that they should fight for liberation. I could be wrong. Okay, I'm not like this big time historian, but I do know that the women's lib movement, well, she was accredited with being the face of the women's lib movement starting around 1948. And I believe that's when the UN actually had its first official meeting. And then um, by 1973, we get Roe v. Wade, and so there was that's a 25-year span, and sure that there were probably incremental changes over those 25 years, and finally, when you get to the early 70s, women begin to feel really empowered, and then Roe v. Wade gets passed, and they feel so much more empowered, and then they figure, okay, well, let's try to see if we can get the men to be emotional, get the men to be sensitive, get the men to express feelings, so forth and so on. And then sometime later, you get this advice of don't solve it, just listen, and on and on. Okay, and so the campaign to get men to think and act more like women uh, really took off at probably in the late 70s, and might have even been expedited a bit since then. But yeah, so I didn't fully make that connection in the previous 95 minutes, uh, but it's done now. Okay, let me see. And the last thing that I'll reference from the previous video, I did talk about, or the last thing that I should have said but didn't say. Not the last thing I'll reference, but the last thing I should have talked about but didn't talk about was these two anecdotes that I have concerning dictators. So I mentioned Psalm 82, verses 6 and 7. I have said to your gods, your sons of the Most High, yet you would die like mere men and fall like a prince. I mentioned the Gospel of John, chapter 10, verse 34, where Jesus says, know ye not that it is written, ye are gods. And I don't think it's true for all people, by the way. But so, I mentioned how that dictators tend to have more organized minds than average people, and I mentioned that I believe there are 10 spheres of thought in the boy/man's mind. Initially, I didn't lay out the first six. I started with the seventh because it's what I call the pavement, that pavement as opposed to pavement. So it's the bottom level of human thought, the first six zones of thought, uh, even though humans have them. If you don't have more than those six, then you're not human. You're an animal or an insect. Okay. But anyway, the bottom level of human thought is this seventh sphere of thought in the mind. You have a spear inside of a spear inside of a spear, and larger spears are more active but less intelligent, less potent, less intense. And so Anyway, this peevement, I said, is where you're just peeved by a lot of things, you're bothered by a lot of things, but you're not able to think consistently or well in terms of even immediate solutions. And all you want to do is have someone who won't solve it, but just listen as you talk about how this and that bothers you. Next level of thought is where you're able to think of immediate solutions, but you're more demanding, and you don't really think long term. You're just kind of in the immediate. This is what would make me happy. This is what would make me feel good for the moment, uh, irrespective of what's going to happen tomorrow, next week, or next month as a result of this immediate choice. Uh, and and then I said that the ninth sphere of thought in the mind is the rationale, which is responsible for mechanical inclination, thinking forward, backwards, and in order for this to happen a day from now, we have to do these five things before then. This is happening now because these five things happened previously. You lay things out in order. You understand mechanics, and after that, you have conceptual thought, which compartmentalizes things. It takes four or five processes that you're familiar with, lays them side by side, and says, okay, there's a shared concept between these several concepts, a basic rule of nature, or a basic rule of people's behavior, people's thinking, societal function, economics, what have you, the universe. There's some general rule that lies between these several processes that I know have taken place. And this is the basic lesson, the basic rule that I need to bear in mind because of these four or five processes having had similar outcomes. Okay, and so that's conceptual thought. And then I said, well, you can be born with up to 10 zones of thought in your mind, but then you can develop an 11th zone of thought, sphere of thought, and Psalm 82, verse 6, as well as John chapter 10, verse 34, where Jesus references Psalm 82, 6, they both say, ye are gods. Now, not everybody, but some people, those who think hard enough, uh, have become gods. And I went on to say that the 10th sphere of thought, the man's conceptual thought, is still on the receiving end, still on the learning end, where he gains an understanding of the concepts that work in the world and the universe around him. And so then this 11th sphere of thought actually has a reverse polarity where instead of taking in knowledge of the world around him, he actually develops his concept of life and forces it outward. And I mentioned how that this truth is most apparent in dictators. But you don't have to be a dictator. You can be a U.S. senator. And I actually named a few people, but I'm not going to go there. I'm almost at 26 minutes. And so, and you could be an entertainer, a comedian, Dave Chappelle. Okay, I gave a name. And you just take your concept of life and just kind of force it outward, whether it's through dictatorship or through what you do as part of the democratic process once you get into Congress, or what you do from the stage as a rapper or a singer or an actor or someone who writes shows, or a comedian. But it's mainly going to be people who are themselves out front and who are not saying something scripted. Comedians who write their own material as opposed to actors who say what someone else told them to say. But when there's that sense of freedom and you have the bully mic, then you can project your concept of life toward others. But Anyway, what I did not mention during that segment, which I just recapped for you at such great length, is that there are two people that I know that have worked overseas and who gave their thoughts on dictatorship. One of them was a guy named Bob, who went to a church that I went to for a long time, and he talked about how he worked for USAID and he worked in the smaller stands, not Afghanistan, not Pakistan, but Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, the other smaller stands. And he said that when he would travel to that part of the world, uh, when before the Iron Curtain came down in 1990, he would walk down the streets of Moscow by himself at 2 a.m. and not worry about being attacked because dictators tend not to tolerate street crime, and so he felt safe. But he said now that the Iron Curtain has come down, he would not be caught walking alone at 2 a.m. In Moscow. He'd be afraid of the crime. Then I spoke to a woman who did similar work, I think, with the civil service down in South America, and she admitted to me that dictators do tend to have a very organized way of thinking. They tend to bring together their cabinets around the dictator's vision. So, yeah, these are some of the positives of having a dictator. And when you don't have a dictator, then you have to tolerate certain things. And I'm running out of time for this